Good afternoon, guys. Thanks for participating in this event, and congratulations on being finalists for our version of Sports Reporters with Talbot from ESPN on Monday night. We're going to ask you guys to reflect on two different questions. One is about whether athletes should be paid, whether college athletes should be paid before they become pro, and also whether performance-enhancing drug-using athletes should be allowed into halls of fame. And one particular angle that we're going to take with these questions is considering elements of diversity and the diversity of not only the athletes who participate in these sports, but also audiences and ownership as well. So keep that in mind. It may be something you prepared for, it may be something that you haven't prepared for yet, but we'll talk a little bit about that. So we're going to go in order from my right to left. So Mike will go first, and then Brandon, and then Cam, and then we'll have an opportunity to follow. Pardon? But you guys do it the other way around? All right. From left to right then. Fair enough. So Cam, you know that in the news, pretty consistently, we've been hearing about two different camps. Some who feel that athletes need to be paid at the college level for their performance because of the way that they're essentially used as revenue generators for schools. And then others who feel as though it's really important to preserve the quote-unquote amateur status of college athletes and not to kind of create conflicts of interest about why they're attending college. So where do you come down on that issue, and do you have a sense that that the racial and ethnic identity of college athletes plays into that question?
First off, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Cameron Lance, I'm a junior here in Malvern. I believe college athletes should be paid, and there's just a couple of reasons I think this. One of them is that even though not all of them will go pro, but the ones that do actually go pro are putting their careers on the line every single time that they go out there on the court or field or whatever sport they're playing. So they're risking the millions of dollars that they could be making in the pros just to play for their college for no money at all. So they should be rewarded no matter how big or small for risking injury and potentially losing millions upon millions of dollars for that. Also, if they have any type of scholarship, which some of the players do, they could lose that scholarship if they're injured. Also, if they are on scholarship, they're obviously bringing in a lot more money than their scholarship is worth, so they should be paid back some of that money that they are not being, that they are bringing into the college and supporting the college with. Also, one other thing is the meal plan that not everyone gets when they're in college. Some scholarships don't come with a meal plan. If you are a college athlete, you obviously don't have a lot of time to do anything else besides do your studies and go to practice. So maybe you don't have, you can't really afford meals if you don't have a meal plan with your scholarship. And if you're going hungry, then you're obviously not going to perform as well as if you weren't hungry, as if you were not hungry. Another point is that college athletes do not have any time to have a job, so they don't have any spendable income to go out and do things with their friends when they're not playing sports or studying, which is rarely any time, but still, you want to have fun in college, so you want to have some money to go out and spend on other things that you might enjoy. One counter-argument to my point is that, yes, they might be getting a free education if they're on a scholarship, or they're getting a lot of money towards their education. However, the graduation rates for the two biggest sports that bring in the most money are basketball and football. And according to a survey, it says that basketball's graduation rate is 74%, which is quite low. Obviously not what they want it to be. They want it to be obviously 100%. So obviously not all that money is going to good use. And after probably about 1 year, most of the big guys that are on full scholarships are out of there and into the pros. So not all that money is going to use. And obviously the racial and diversity kind of thing goes into there. As we might all know, a lot of these players are predominantly of African American background, and some of them might not come from the best ethnic situation, or economic situation. And some of that money could go towards their parents, or go to their parents to help them out and do some other things of that nature.
Great, thanks, Cam. We'll have an opportunity to revisit some of your perspective. Looks like Mike, you're up next, and I'm curious to hear your perspective on not only on what Cam said, but perhaps other angles on this same exact question.
Well, I'm Michael Drugan. I'm a junior, for those of you who don't know me. And with March Madness approaching, there are 3 things that I know I can rely on. Witnessing buzzer beaters, watching my brackets fail miserably, and seeing the Enterprise rent-a-car commercial reminding us that most college athletes will go pro in something other than sports. It really never resonated with me, possibly because I've seen it so many times, but after doing some research, it really hit home. The NCAA gives college basketball players a 1.2% chance of making it to the pros. This means that the other 98.8% must figure out a way to make a living for themselves after college in off something other than their basketball skills. And it's the same case for just about every other sport. The classic argument people use in lobbying in favor for pay for play is that colleges make all this money off the athletes' back without giving back to the athletes, but this couldn't be further from the truth. Out of the 228 public Division I schools in the NCAA, only 22 were able to cover all their athletic expenses without taking money from other sources. So really it is only about 10% of schools that profit off their athletes. Additionally, college athletes are getting paid simply by the fact that they're getting into schools that might otherwise reject them if they weren't an athlete. And student athletes, while they're there, not only get a free education if they're good, but they also get preferential treatment when it comes to free tutors, class placement, and a group of friends right off the bat. And not to mention that meeting girls is also a heck of a lot easier. Take Penn State, for example. The in-state tuition is $38,000 and $38,310 a year. Based off the NCAA's time mandates, and student would be making about $63.53 an hour. Now, a rebuttal may be that student athletes have so much work to do that they don't have time to get a real job, but it's not much different for every other student. College is a time that is time-consuming and demanding of every student, whether they're playing sports or not. And every student struggles financially. It's very rare you'll find a student who, can support themselves adequately or, live an easy life. But compared to a regular student, college athletes emerge, if they have a full scholarship, they emerge at graduation with zero debt. On the other hand, the average student will, on graduation day, have $24,000 in debt. And most importantly, the increase in earning potential once earning a college degree highly outweighs the temporary cash that you earn over those 4 years. And another problem the NCAA would run into is allocation of money, because like I said before, it is only a small portion of colleges who are actually profiting from their athletes. So mid-major colleges would have a really, really tough time finding the money to actually pay their athletes. And also with Title IX involved, like Cam said, the only 2 profitable sports are men's basketball and football. And when you throw in Title IX, it creates problems in, are women going to get paid because they're not making money? Is it just the sports that are making money? Do those athletes get paid? And while watching tonight's playing game, I will be satisfied knowing that these players are not getting paid to be playing in those games.
Great, thanks, Mike. Let's switch focus, and Brandon, again, we'll have an opportunity to come back to some of the things that Cam and Mike reflected on, but let's talk a little bit about performance-enhancing drugs and whether athletes who have used them once or repeatedly should be eligible for the Hall of Fame. It's obviously a hotly contested topic. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I do believe, I'm Brandon Franzak, senior Malvern Prep. I do believe that users of performance-enhancing drugs should have the opportunity to be elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame. And the reason why I believe this, the main reason, is because of the span of years that performance-enhancing drugs had on Major League Baseball. It was probably roughly from 1995 to 2005, and even continues to this day. So people can make arguments that some of the greatest players of this time used performance-enhancing drugs. And I believe that if you deny these players from having the opportunity to be elected, you are not recognizing a long period of time in the history of baseball that would not be recognized in the Hall of Fame. And so the problem is that we, in the early 2000s, the Major League Baseball did not have a very good system of finding out who was positive, who wasn't, and before 2000, performance-enhancing drugs were legal in Major League Baseball. Not necessarily by law, but in Major League Baseball, it wasn't illegal to use performance-enhancing drugs. And so I think the biggest reason was because of that history phase. Over 20 years of baseball history is contained by the Major League drug problem, and it's starting to finally disappear. And one point that I wanted to make out was that Hall of Famer owner Tanya Yaki of the Boston Red Sox, he worked to keep baseball segregated, yet somehow he is in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. So I do not think you can have this man in the Hall of Fame, but not have a player who used performance-enhancing drugs to perform his performance. And also Hall of Fame pitcher Gaylord Perry admitting to doctoring baseballs. This would be altering the baseball to your advantage to pitching and to tailor it in such a way that you can throw it a better pitch. And Hall of Famer outfielder Ty Cobb once climbed into the stands and beat a man. And he is in the Hall of Fame. And also, don't forget how many players took steroids and were absolutely terrible. It wasn't only steroids that made these players better. To hit over 70 home runs is not just steroids. You could use, I could use steroids and I would not hit 70 home runs. Anyone can I'm a swimmer, so anyone can put on a super fast suit that has no water resistance and they will not swim fast. You will have to train, you have to put the work in. So clearly some of the greatest players who did happen to use this were a product of what was going on in the clubhouse and seeing almost so many, at least half the players using performance-enhancing drugs. So, thanks.
Thanks, Brandon. Cam, let's follow up on some of Brandon's thoughts. I'm curious to hear, in particular, what you think about his suggestion that Major League Baseball didn't have either a reliable or consistent approach to testing for performance-enhancing drugs, whether that was because the technology wasn't sufficient or there wasn't enough of a political appetite within Major League Baseball leadership to look for this sort of thing. How do you feel about that? Do you agree with Brandon that we shouldn't necessarily hold the players accountable for mistakes that were made, perhaps, at a higher level than that?
Well, considering Brandon said that Major League Baseball didn't really have like a strict set of rules regarding performance-enhancing drugs, I I still think the players should be held accountable for their decisions. I mean, they obviously knew, they had knowledge of what they were doing, and that kind of making themselves a lot better and giving themselves an unfair advantage to obviously perform better than most of the players in the league is just inexcusable. They had full knowledge of what they were doing, even though Major League Baseball didn't have set laws regarding it. This promotes like this reflects a poor image on all of Major League Baseball, because I can't tell you how many times I've heard like all the great guys like Mike Piazza, Craig Biggio, two guys that were recently up for Hall of Fame induction. They were obviously accused for being steroid users, and just like all the great players that may have done it naturally, may have done it without steroids, they are just accused of doing it solely based on the fact that they're good, and it just kind of angers me, being a baseball player, that being naturally good is just associated with using steroids.
And on that topic, Mike, how do you feel about Brandon's claim that that perhaps there were plenty of others who did or maybe continue to use performance-enhancing drugs, but maybe they stink, and that we shouldn't necessarily assume that there's some correlation between the use of PEDs and Hall of Fame level performance? And Cam, why don't you pass down the microphone to Mike so he can answer?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that statement, that PEDs they can mold a player and make him better, but they're not going to change who he is. If you look at Barry Bonds, he says that, or it said that he first tested positive for PEDs it's alleged that he tested positive in 1999, and by then he had already had 400 home runs and was well on his way to being a Hall of Fame player. And you see nowadays in baseball that the people who are using steroids are the ones who are trying to make the jump from AAA to the major leagues. And normally, if you're using steroids and you're in that position, you actually you're not thinking about the Hall of Fame. You're thinking about making that $1 million, or being able to, say you're in the major leagues, or be able to be in the nicer hotels and get the airplane rides. But I definitely agree with that statement that PEDs are something that can help you go from very good to elite, but they're not going to take you from middle of the road to Hall of Famer.
Great, thanks. Let's pick up on that question of incentives, and in particular, the question of what category of athlete is eligible for, or has the opportunity perhaps to compete for that role in a highly selective or highly competitive, rather, college sports program, with the potential perhaps to play in the pros. And Brandon, earlier, Cam suggested that many of the athletes who perform at colleges for football and basketball to huge revenue makers, they're student athletes of color, African American, Hispanic, and other racial ethnic backgrounds, often with an overlap between racial ethnic background and low socioeconomic status. Is there a question of inequity when we start to perhaps prevent student athletes from those backgrounds from earning a living that's going to be fundamental not only for them as individuals, but perhaps sometimes even for their families? Should we be recognizing them?
Well, I know Cardell Jones of Ohio State, he was not in a very good, safe situation back at home, but I think Ohio State was a safer place, and they gave him an opportunity which he may or may not have deserved by his some of the troubles that he got into. So I think the any college institution offers a better deal of housing and offering counseling and having these coaches, they're basically fathers because these kids are by themselves for the first time in their life. And I think if the coaches and the counselors and the trainers nurture this someone of a lower socio-economic situation, then I think it is a better place to be with a free education and almost unlimited resources to disposal. And sometimes you don't even know if you need these resources. Sometimes you have too many resources and you're not sure what to do.
So it sounds like you and Mike agree that perhaps these athletes aren't being paid a salary in a traditional sense, but they're accruing a significant number of benefits and that they're fairly diverse benefits.
Yes, and one thing was the University of Alabama, I think in 2008 they made $123 million, but their costs were $122 million. So they only made $1 million, which in the grand schemes of things is basically nothing. And so they're investing this in new equipment and in more coaches and more counselors and everything. So it's going right back to them. It's not just the face value of the scholarship. They're getting a lot more, which you don't directly see the money.
So Cam, just to circle back to your original set of statements, because you fairly strongly supported the idea that student athletes should be paid. How ought we to calculate the cost and benefit to not only the student athlete, but also to the institution, and in some cases to taxpayers, as we support public institutions. How do we figure out what's the mathematical equation that we should be thinking about when we think about whether student athletes deserve to get paid? Clearly, they're receiving other benefits besides potentially a salary, and you suggested that there were plenty of risks that they're assuming as well that other students don't have to take on. Do you have a way of thinking about how to conceptualize why somebody should get paid and what kind of a number you peg to that?
Well, I think it kind of comes back around to the financial aid kind of thing, like for students that aren't on an athletic scholarship or anything. Based on need, maybe the players who come from a poor background might receive a little bit more money than one who comes from a more suburban kind of rich area. Just kids who need money to maybe send back to their parents at home to help them get out of a tough situation. And the university has to determine that, obviously. The way they would accrue that money is, obviously the university has other needs, but they might be able to take it out of some of the financial aid or other sources of revenue from the college to give these athletes these benefits that they might actually need a great deal of to help their friends and family back where they came from out of that tough situation, who actually helped them get there in a very big sense, because they were the ones who supported them and got them through all these tough times to get to the place that they are now, and potentially could go on to do much bigger things.
Great, thanks. And Mike, can you come back to some of your comments? I thought you did a very nice job of citing some important statistics. For example, with the fact that only about a little more than 1% of college athletes go on to perform as pros, and that only maybe 10% of schools are actually covering their costs with athletic programs. But thinking about outcomes for student athletes, for the other 99% who aren't going to be pro athletes, what's your sense of chances for them? You did say that the opportunity for them to earn money with a college degree is significantly higher, for sure. But are there any data to track student athletes in particular as a class, as a subclass of all graduates of college, to see how those 99%, what their earning potential looks like after they graduate?
Well, obviously with such a large sample size, it's going to be kind of difficult to do that, but just, I think there are definitely ways to track that, and I'm sure there are ways that people are tracking that. But it's kind of, you hear in the news that places like UNC and Syracuse are kind of corrupt within the way they're handling the students' education, and that might make you think that it might make you want to generalize about other schools or the rest. But like I said, with such a large sample size, if it's one or two or three or a small handful of schools that actually are corrupt, it really is just doesn't really even affect the big picture of how these student athletes are really benefiting from this degree. And it also shouldn't reflect the whole, where where a majority of colleges, we assume or should assume, are following the rules and working to get these kids the best education they can while maintaining their sports and athletics and keeping them elite both academically and athletically. And
That's a great response, and we'll end with Brandon. So, Brandon, you started us off on the topic of performance-enhancing drugs, and maybe we can link the two topics now. Mike is suggesting that certain student athletes or certain colleges have failed when it comes to ensuring that athletes are receiving the education that the colleges are promising them. North Carolina is a prominent example of this, with a scandal that goes back perhaps 10, 15 years. Or even longer, with their basketball players taking fake classes or not taking classes at all and simply getting grades. Is there some way in which that culture of student athletes being held less accountable, at least the presumption that they're being less accountable, does that convert these young men and women into pro athletes who are more likely to bend the rules when it comes to performance-enhancing drugs? Do you see some connection in the decision-making process?
I think you repeat the question.
Sure. If you think about student athletes who are receiving significant financial benefits by way of their athletic scholarships to perform on a court or a field or a pool or any number of other competitive arenas, they're earning something by being athletes, right? Whether we say it's a salary or something else, they're getting a benefit for that. But we assume that they're not simply competing in a sport. We assume that they're also getting an education. And some recent scandals, North Carolina, Syracuse, and we can probably name a bunch of other schools, scandals have shown that there are plenty of places where student athletes, particularly in certain sports, don't attend classes, sometimes enroll in classes that are fake classes, sometimes just simply don't show up at all and get grades because professors are complicit in a kind of culture of dishonesty about student athletes' academic performance. If you're a basketball player or a football player in that kind of culture, do you see that having an impact on your ethical decision-making as a pro athlete? Are you more likely, perhaps, to say, well, I didn't really have to go to class to get that A, or I didn't have to do all my work to get my diploma. Maybe it's not such a big deal if I use performance-enhancing drugs. Do you think that there's something about the culture that might actually promote bending of the rules?
Yeah, I would think you would. I think the biggest problem would be if you were a player who was injured or had some life-threatening illness and they suddenly had to stop playing. I think that would definitely come back to haunt them. But also what I've heard is some players that leave early from the university would possibly have the opportunity to come back if one of those situations occur and to finish their degree of what they actually started. And I think that would give them an opportunity to kind of realize what they came there for in the first place and really get what they have been deserved, and then they kind of know what that's their focus, getting their degree. I think one thing I've heard is it's about the education, not the degree. You can get a piece of paper that doesn't really mean anything. You need the education. And then once they're done with sports, you have that education, and then whatever your talent may be, you can go forward with that. So I think I like the idea of a player can go to a school 1 year, 2 years, go to the pros. Once they're done, if they don't have their degree, I think the university should have the obligation to have them come back to school, complete classes, get an education, get their diploma, and move on with their life.
Sounds like
If their pro career does not work out to what they dreamed it would be.
it sounds like you're suggesting that there should be some stronger institutional responsibility to the players.
Yes, there are plenty of sad stories where their pro career has not worked out and their life has not worked out because the institution wasn't held accountable for their students' education.
Great. All right, guys, we're right up actually into the next period. So thank you. This was fantastic, and we'll be hearing from the judges soon.
Thanks, guys.